The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Return the Jewels. Also, there's explicit language. Hi everyone, welcome to the 4th episode of Return the Jewels. It's a rainy day and I got a million things to do, so I'm just going to get this intro out of the way. This is a really good episode. We have today a very special guest. Her name is Electra Telesford. She's a comedian. She's Guyanese, Black, Indian, Amerindian. I hope I'm doing all of that right. But we had a really good conversation. We talked about marginalization in the entertainment industry, how narratives that intend to be authentic somehow get minstrelized, and just generally how to navigate those corporate spaces, dealing with corporate spaces that are involved in entertainment and content production and advertising, and navigating those spaces, dealing with microaggressions while also, not having to be a token, all sorts of stuff. It's a really good interview. Have fun with it, listen to it, take your time, whatever. It's pretty heady conversation. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Right there is our website. There's more info there. We appreciate all your support. Thank you. Oh yeah, here's Electra Telesford.
Hey.
How's it going? How are you doing today?
I'm solid. Pretty good right now.
Yeah, I know. You were telling me you're in Zoom calls all over. So, we're not going to try to take too much of your time. We really appreciate you being here. So I'm going to jump into it. We start off with a segment that we call
Tokenize or Fetishize.
Mm-hmm.
And in this, it's like maybe share a personal anecdote, or maybe somebody, an anecdote from somebody that has been in a situation where they were either tokenized or fetishized. And hopefully you can elaborate the difference between the two and experiencing it, and, let us know. So, I don't know if you have one.
Yeah, so I think I would think about it in terms of the comedy space. It's a very common conversation in terms of, I do a lot of what would be considered white rooms. And I think oftentimes when I talk to other Black comics about doing white rooms, not specifically about me, but there is this idea that like Black comics that do white rooms are there only as a token versus like the value of what, or like the, not merit, but like their comedy. Right. So I'd say that that's something that comes up really frequently and is a source of ire for me. It's a bit frustrating to have that conversation all the time. But I think the difference between like fetishize and tokenize is fetish feels like a bit sexual. It feels like there's always a sexual connotation to fetishizing versus tokenized. I think there's a tokenized can be non-sexual. And it also, to me, feels like it's like a weird, like a warped sense of like positiveness to being the token. Like I think that like a token is supposed to be it's not a positive thing, but a token is positive. Like when you think about like the objective and the what it is supposed to be. But being tokenized is negative inherently.
Right. Having, I guess, being a token and having like the.
I'm not even using these, so.
Huh?
I wasn't even using these. It was just to let people know that I have money.
Well, now that we've established that.
Huh?
But speaking of tokenized, with the AirPods, no. So being tokenized, it has inherent value in it, or at least I guess you perceive the value, if you're a token, that you can perhaps push the needle forward on representation. But that's often not the case because you're more manipulated and the value is extracted from you than you're able to get from it.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't think from the perspective of the token in this case that it is positive, but I think the people doing the tokenizing think that it is positive. Like I think they think that they're doing
Okay.
something symbolic often that they're actually not doing. But I think also that not every time that in the context of this white room scenario that you are put on the show because you're being tokenized. I think there are other reasons potentially for why you're on a show. Although being tokenized is something that happens because they're like, oh, this lineup is looking a little pasty, and then you know.
That makes a lot. Okay, so being tokenized, not being the main metric for which you're hired, but it's always in the back of your mind. And I know you've been in like writers' rooms and stuff, but um, getting pushback from white peers where they have the premise that you're hired by affirmative action or to be tokenized, wherein it's like the value is a direct clash of your merit against your merit. Does that happen frequently to you? Because I mean,
I think the conversation is often yes, that does happen, but I also think that conversation happens amongst Black comics, in terms of, or like just like people of POC comics, but most of the conversation I'm having are with Black comics, about frustrations about not being in certain rooms, and that the Black comics that are allowed in, or not I'm allowed in, I don't like that language, but the comics that are asked to be on lineups cater, and the Black comics cater in some way to white audiences in a way that I don't think is necessarily always true. And in some ways, saying that actually lessens the value of the comic versus like perhaps there are Black comics that are in these rooms because they're doing good work. You know what I mean?
so the Black comics that are in the rooms doing the good work, their voices get drowned out. Yes or no by the people who are catering to the white audiences because that might push their careers forward, or does that happen much?
That I mean, I think that there's so many factors that go into this. Is actually I've been thinking about all week. There's so many factors that go into like, getting booked. You know, like there's a lot of factors that go, like getting booked is a variety of things. It's like who you know, right? It's word of mouth. And I think that there are a lot of circles happening at once in the comedy scene, and they're not often connected. And like every once in a while, it's almost like a splitting of a cell or something. Like every once in a while they'll connect, and then you can kind of like jump into this new circle. But I think the criticism of these like white majority rooms is valid, but sometimes in the conversation can unintentionally invalidate the experiences of the few Black people that are in the space, and like almost unintentionally, yeah, because it's like, okay, Black people are not in this room, or there aren't that many, and the ones that are not there.
But if I'm a white audience member, I can perceive that performer as speaking for all Black comedians, right? It's very easy for me to make that jump, right?
Yeah,
I feel like it's made easy for me to make that jump.
Yeah, it does. I can agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, do you think? Okay, so I know we didn't really get into a personal anecdote though about tokenized or fetishized, and maybe we can come back to it. Mm-hmm. But that issue of there being like maybe a zero-sum space for, or a trade-off space for representation, where you have token voices which are, you know, designed for advancement, playing, catering to certain audiences, etc. And, you know, they'll double down token voices, and they're being framed and used to whitewash, you know, authentic voices. So,
but I would push back on that, I think, because only because it kind of suggests that there's like a monolithic voice, and that's kind of my, you know, like where, like I said, like I want to go back to this idea that the criticism about like white rooms is legit, like it's 100% legit. But I think in the conversation, it's very easy to, what is the word? To like brush aside, or to like broad stroke the Black comedians that are in those rooms. As like I think that there's an assumption, or there's a general like perception that if you are a Black comic doing comedy in a white room, it's because they're comfortable with you. And I just think that that can be the case, but it's not always the case. And I think it should be approached with nuance when we have these conversations.
So, what's the nuance?
Nuance is not for everybody.
Okay, but anyways, I'm bringing up that point to
Mhm.
get to. I see that your day job and then the work you do outside of comedy is you're a content consultant. So I'm sure you
Mhm.
have these. Well, like you said, you have these conversations all the time and about the line of like inclusion and diversity and representation.
Mhm.
Who's behind the scenes versus who's in front of the camera, tokenism, all of that stuff. So I say that to say you as a 30 something, I'm just gonna, or whatever,
Something. We don't need this
a
30.
30-year-old, the 29, 20, you as a
Something.
24-year-old, very
Something
accomplished.
suggests more, and I don't like that.
Okay, I didn't know your age. I just
Wow, you just like judge me off my like wrinkles. Like I don't know.
no, for your wisdom.
Thank you. Carry on. Carry on.
But anyways, you as a 24-year-old that's just absolutely doing all this stuff, right?
Mhm.
Your sense of responsibility in crafting narratives or at least influencing narratives, or if you have, let's say, you have a contract on the line or something, and that's literally how you pay your rent, and having that sense of responsibility to speak up
Mhm.
something, when like some issue is getting steamrolled over, how do you draw that line? Or like what goes through your head in making that sort of decision calculus when issues like that come up? Because I'm sure they have for you.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it's two things. One, it's not my project, right? So like what happens if I'm consulting on something? What
Right.
happens? I'm there to consult and give my feedback, but they, regardless of what the topic is or what the decision they need to make, it's their decision to make.
Right.
So that's how I look at it. It's not my project, so like I'm only here to consult. But um, fortunately, a lot of the things I've worked on have included or been the face has been a person of color, and so I just feel an obligation to give them the best quality content that I can create. And when we get their voice, incorporate their voice, a lot of the stuff I've worked on is involving young people of color in the spotlight, and so they advocate to like let the world know that they are political, and so I try to like go with that. But always respectful of what their voice is and always respectful of the fact that it's not my project. So I'm limited. Getting hired back is not really a concern. Like I think that's important as long as I'm honest and I put I'm honest, and that's the most that I can do and be respectful and professional. And if that's not good enough, then well, that's pretty much
So
it.
so okay. So your ability to walk away, speak what you need to say, right? All of that. How much does that eat at you though? Like heavy the heaviness of making those kind of decisions. Has it become easier?
Um, it's yeah, I think it is what it is. Like I have a really there'll be other projects and there'll be other things but I just kind of go with what I've just described to you. It's just that's like my own personal code of ethics. And so as long as I follow those, I don't feel too bad about it.
That's why we love you on the podcast.
you know.
This is great.
But I will say it hasn't been like a huge, no one's like putting like $1 million in front of my face and being like,
Right.
so.
I mean, I guess if you're establishing your long record of like a certain type of behavior or responsibility or able to wield responsibility, I'm sure when that kind of money comes in front of you, you know, the decision won't be too difficult to stick to what you do. Maybe, hopefully.
No, I know I agree with you. And I think that's why I am 24, as you say, but I
Right.
think that,
No, I thought you were 22. I
it's on some Benjamin Button shit for sure. But like, I just, I agree with you that I went into it with this idea of like, I have to have things that I'm willing to do and not do. And I have to follow that from the very beginning of my career until the end. Right. And if it doesn't work out because I'm too committed to my morals and they're not even super like strong, it's just don't do like racist Like it's like really small, you know what I mean? Anything outside of like racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic stuff, I'm totally fine. And so yeah, it's something I have to stick with now because it's only going to get harder if I start making these concessions.
Wow. Okay. So now I want to shift back to you being a content consultant, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at your LinkedIn, but I'm looking back at a way earlier job, and it says that you were an intern for Harriet.com and writing features, editorials, collecting data for hard and soft news, generating click-worthy headlines,
Mm-hmm.
providing editor interesting web content, making blah 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 blah. Sorry, I blah 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 your description.
No, it's blah 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 shit myself.
Well, I'm sure. Keywords. Keywords. SEO stuff. SEO stands for search engine
optimization. Yeah, and yeah, could you tell us how you went about working in that space, being who you are with the morals that you have, and how it affected what you done in that space?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that now because like I recently, and I don't want anybody to do this, but like I looked at some of the articles and I was much younger when I was a part of that
like
organization.
14.
Yeah, it was, puberty was really taking its toll at the time. But yeah, and I think that like part of it was just stuff that I want to talk about. So for Harriet, it's a Black woman space. So the things at that age I was interested in, colorism, like feminist ideology, things like that. And so that's what I wrote about. And occasionally I'll actually get people a message about it, like, oh, I read that article. I'm like, that's from 2013 or like 2014 or whatever year that was from. But yeah.
So you would say that because of the editorial direction of forharriet.com, you were able to use all of these marketing tools, SEO stuff, the clickbaity headlines for good. Because right, okay. So
Yeah.
I wanted to get into. I'm sure you're still abreast of all that stuff, and as it's changing, and with your work, I'm sure you know all about all the metrics and everything. So the space for marginalization of people using these enhanced tools of marketing, right? I'm sure you see bigger patterns than I can as just a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
But are they there? Can you elaborate, or am I just guessing at something?
I think you might be guessing at something.
Okay.
I mean,
Or can you rephrase the question a little bit?
Okay. So like Cambridge Analytica, stuff like that. The ability to micro target people, to use propaganda and individualized propaganda to I guess try to sway people, and it opens up this space where you know all these things are being, the real money is in pushing this propaganda, not necessarily, and that in itself marginalizes people. But then maybe as it's reflected in like the companies that do the analysis, the metadata people and all of them, the makeup of that, I guess, I mean, I'm assuming it's probably all white and Indian people or something, but do you think that the makeup of that lead in itself is a machine that marginalizes other people of color, or like?
I would assume so, right? Like if the room itself doesn't have everyone in it, and if the driving force is capital,
Right.
then I feel like inherently then it has to also it has to oppress,
because
right?
there wouldn't be anybody to say, like, there wouldn't be anybody there wouldn't be like a moral compass to say like, oh yeah, this Cambridge Analytica stuff, maybe we shouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
So that kind of, okay, sorry, it takes me a while to make a point, but so that kind of thing about like navigating through the corporate space and being marginalized, and then because you're marginalized, incidentally, the higher level discretionary decisions are like a feedback loop with that marginalization.
Yeah.
So those higher level discretionary decisions leave out Black and brown people, and because of that, do you think because the motive is capital, it's a rational actor model, they drown out other, or not necessarily intentionally, but drown out other voices, those other voices may be the moral compass or some sort of like ethical responsibility in the corporate sphere, because it's like you see all these bad campaigns that come out, the Gucci turban or like the what, you know, so much shit. But like nobody, it was like nobody was in the room to say no.
Hmm.
So do you think that going forward in the corporate world or the entertainment world on the corporate side or anything, there's going to be a space for like some sort of like not independent commission, but like a different space that companies have in house for like independent auditors of creative ideas that may be like diverse, you know, or have those ideals be like, hey guys, don't say these words because they're very coded, and here's
Hmm.
why they're coded. Um,
What a terrible position to be in.
to be
Like
that kind of consultant.
not to be the decision maker, but to be the one that checks the decision. Like I think that'd be such a terrible space. But I agree with you. That's probably what's going to happen, right?
Um,
But also sometimes I wonder, to go the specific example of like when Gucci does that like lip turtleneck or a turban or something like that. That nobody in the room thought that that was a terrible idea. I tend to believe that they did, and they realized that like the publicity would be worth a lot, and they went ahead and did that
oh,
anyway. More so than like I think that's the thing that I don't know
it's like when
enough about,
companies recall faulty products, the damage done is less than the recall.
or just like I don't know
Well,
like
it's
the
always easy.
public outcry. I don't know if it's as damaging as we think, or if those shirts, those turtlenecks don't sell out. Coolest monkey in the jungle H&M t-shirt doesn't sell out due to the outcry. Like I think it's a bit of an optimistic perspective to
So
think that, or like like you're being a bit altruistic with like the consumer and in their and how they what they choose to buy, and you're kind of assuming that like people are more well intended than they actually are.
so do you think in those kind of boardroom environments or whatever, this strategy that you're talking about for marketing, where it's like, yeah, we'll take the write off, do you think that's discussed openly, or like very very closely held, and then the marketing campaign itself or the justification for the marketing campaign itself has gone through some sort of filter of another sales pitch, you know, to
I
the
think I'd imagine it being kind of coded.
yeah.
I think it might be coded. I think it might be not enough people of color in the room to be like you're saying, to not to be a fact checker, but just to, even if they are there, they're not necessarily trying to follow, you know, like they're not going to speak out about it. Um, yeah, but I would imagine that that conversation, if there is, it would be coded, or I don't know, like maybe this is like me being theoretical, but like maybe like every year this is like one designer has to come up with a racist thing, you know. Like what are we gonna do this year? Maybe like every year there's just a thing to do. You
It's kind
know.
of like how movie studios have an allotment for one action adventure for every
Exactly. So they're like, okay, they like spin a wheel and they're like, okay, we're gonna wear the chief's Native American chief's headdress on Elle magazine, and then that's just what happens. I
and
don't
we're gonna do a walk back, but we're gonna call ourselves the Washington football team.
exactly, you know, exactly. So I just think that, you know, I don't know exactly how those things work.
No, that's probably exactly how it works.
Yeah, I feel like you
Just
nailed
how
that
you
one on.
inferred it, huh?
I feel like she nailed that one on the head. I mean, to have that compliance group and also the marketing wheel, it's there can't be. There's no way that's not being done.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that wheel in The Wolf of Wall Street when they're throwing dwarves on it. In the,
I've never seen it. I've never seen the movie.
spoilers.
It's fine. I'll never see it.
Okay, it's a
Never
movie, anyways. I think it's just like it's like I guess it's like a cocaine movie or something. Anyways, so your childhood. So on this podcast, I'm trying to talk to like a lot of first generation friends and peers, or immigrant peers and friends, but people that are in their industries doing things, because I think over the course of however many episodes we'll have,
Mhm.
uh, I want it to kind of be like a patched together guidebook for
Mhm.
like younger a younger generation of colors, because I got nephews and nieces and stuff,
Mhm.
but like to see it's like, oh yeah, don't make these missteps, or maybe these myths about this corporate thing, or because I feel like our environments feed us a lot of bullshit, and so
Yeah.
if they could just have these kind of conversations, they'd be great. So that being said, talking with first generation people can help kind of demystify a lot of things that we don't really get to have conversations about growing up. And
Mhm.
um, so you are first generation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us what that means, to be first generation?
Um, First generation means that your parents were actually there's a whole point five generation too. So technically my mom is point five because I think if you got here before 13 or 14, you're considered like you're considered to be the point five. If you got here as an adult, you're considered to be I'm confused.
Wow.
I
I
think
didn't even know
I've
that
definitely
shit.
fucked something up, but there is like a
No.
generation where if you got here as a child, you have a different label. And then if you I'm first generation, I forgot. I totally forgot actually. But anyway, I was the first generation born here. I'll make it a complete sentence so that it makes sense. But there is a point five generation, and I think that's young adults that were born elsewhere but came here as in their adolescence.
Uh,
Oh my God,
Fani
I'm a point
immigrated.
five generation kid.
When did you come here? When did
Like
you come here?
I was 11 years old.
11. You
Me
might
too.
be at the cutoff. Let's.
You
I
said
want to just.
13.
We'll just call you an immigrant.
God. Back to what I was, I guess.
Let me see. I'm gonna Google it real quick. Okay. 1.5 individual. Oh, yeah. So 1.5 refers to individuals who immigrate to a new country before or during their early teens.
Oh, okay. So you made it, Fani. You're
You
point
did it.
five.
And actually, first generation, yeah, it's a whole thing. But yeah, we'll go with first generation. It has a general like popular culture meaning. We all know what we're
Right.
talking
You know, because I mean, growing up, I was always told, well, I'm not first generation, I'm second generation, or that
about.
I'm first generation. The immigrant generation is first generation. On the last episode, we had Dre. He clarified it as first generation being, hey, you're just the first generation that grew up here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know, that kind of brings some clarity to it.
Yeah.
But
It's a bit like I think like the way we use like it's two entirely incompatible ways of talking about it, but we all kind of understand in the context of what we mean.
right. So, but the common thread of growing up first generation is that you have a kind of I don't know if there's a word, but like biculturalism, and I'm sure you have to like
Mhm.
balance the two. I know that like have for me, I grew up in Mississippi in like a whole white world, so it's like balancing this culture of like trying to have friends and peers with my home culture, and
Mhm.
maybe like I felt like I would boast about one or hide one from the other,
Mhm.
and I feel like that's probably not an uncommon thing.
Yeah, I mean the bicultural thing. I just learned about that like an hour ago on Twitter. No, actually, no, I learned about it from someone else who's very popular on Twitter. But yeah,
I didn't just make that up. No, I'm
no, it's like yeah, exactly. It's a whole new world. Like I just got used to BIPOC, and they're like, hold my beer. I got another one for you. Biculturalism, and yeah, I mean it's interesting because I grew up in a really Caribbean neighborhood.
yeah,
So I didn't really know anyone who wasn't Caribbean until middle school.
really.
Yeah, because then my elementary school is really good, so I got to go to a local one. But then when I got to middle school, my mom was like, "Yeah, you can't stay here." So then I had to go across town on a yellow bus, and that was the first time it was like really interesting. It was a performing arts school, and so then I learned about a few things. I learned about like like Russian and I'm Jewish and I'm this and I'm that. I didn't really know what that was. And then I also learned about like I'm biracial, and that was like really interesting to me too because I was like, oh, that's like a thing, like, and only because it was like to me like your parents are two different colors, like you want a biscuit. Like I didn't really know that like that was like real, like, and this is like not me saying this now, but like as a sixth
Right.
grade,
As a kid,
I
you
don't
didn't see color.
yeah, like you get two. I remember one of my friends like telling me at the time, she's like, "I'm biracial. My dad is black, and my mom is British." And I was like literally, like I don't really understand, especially because Guyanese people, it's like
Black.
everyone's a different color in your whole family, so it's like I'm not really seeing like why you think you're special. But now I have more, empathy.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So growing up with multiple shades in your of skin tone, I guess, in your family, and multiple different, I guess, different textures of hair and
Yeah.
all sorts of things like that. That must mean that when did you, so 13ish? That's when you had
That was
that
like,
big hammer
like
on your head?
11.
11?
Yeah.
That was the switching of schools
Yeah.
that triggered it?
Yeah. I mean, I had like I like, dabbled with white people, like summer vacation, like camp, and but that was the first time that I was like, oh, y'all all different.
And you can totally use names because it's in the past, but do you have any like specific like a story that comes to mind from when you were a kid? What's like burning in your mind that from then that may be related to that kind of realization?
Well, 6th and 7th grade, I went to a lot of bar mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs, and that was like really like I went to like, and they were so elaborate, like they were just so just like but it was interesting to like go to a person's house of worship and temple, like, and this is how I knew I was a good friend looking back, because I would be the only one that would go to the temple part, because that shit would be like 6 hours or like some ridiculous time. I mean, it was probably like 2, but I was 11, 11, 12. So yeah, I think like that's like the first memory that I have, like, oh, like people really do different things. This is so wild,
Do Guyanese people have something like that, like
Yeah.
quinceañeras or bar mitzvahs? But
I think they might do like the Sweet 16 stuff, but there's no like culture. Like I don't think that there's any like thing. So, like I don't think that that's like a part of it.
Is there well, I guess the Labor Day parade is that's a thing?
I mean, we have things like that. We've got like Masharani and we've got like holidays, but like a coming of age thing, I wouldn't. Not that I know of.
Coming of age, okay, bro. Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess holidays. I don't even think we've got like a coming. That's a kind of a weird thing.
Y'all diaspora is kind of crazy, to be honest.
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
No,
run us through from the bottom up, Electra.
Well, it's just like so fascinating to me. I taught at one point this whole thing about like the East India Company and just like what happened prior, like what the subcontinent of India was prior to the arrival of like Europeans. And it was just like not, and I think it's like kind of the similar struggle to what's going on in the continent of Africa right now. It's just like it had its own boundaries. There were Mongols. There were like so many people doing different things at that point. And so now it's like post independence, post colonization. It's like now it's like we're like, you know the thing, and it's like, no, I don't know the thing because I'm from like 1,000 miles away. I don't know the thing, so it's just kind of interesting.
I don't even know that thing.
Right, but it's interesting, right? Because it's like, and then now you have like the more becoming more vocal diaspora of like the Caribbean, the Indo-Caribbean diaspora is becoming quite vocal right now about like their like affinity or like their being part of like Indian culture in a way that didn't really exist before, or like wasn't really a conversation before.
So does that mean we're about to talk about Indian matchmaker?
Oh God, that was. But I found out some background about that girl because at first I was like, first of all,
we're talking about Nadia, of course.
Yeah, and she's Guyanese.
Right.
But I found out because at first I was like, why does she even want to go on this show? Like I'm so confused about why she wants to be on this.
Tell us your research. I have no idea. She
wanted to do a match. Like she's one of the matchmaking part. It wasn't so much like the Indian matchmaker. It was like she was looking for a matchmaker. And then like and then I think they found their angle of like, oh, she's like she's Indo-Guyanese, and like, what does that mean? But it kind of, the show edited it to make it seem like she was like actively pursuing a guy from the continent, and like that to me was kind of like a weird angle,
it felt like, or maybe it was how it was edited. It was just like, how is there so much like ingrained self-hate about this stuff? And it was just like, it was uncomfortable.
And they like took her to Sybil's, and I think it's called Sybil's. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like Sybil's in on Liberty Avenue, and is like, let me get some paratha. You know how I love this, and it's just like, it was just very weird. And then like nobody like, we're all the same. I'm gonna get some like, I don't know, like Madame G, and it's like, no, girl, like you haven't been there in like 200 years. Like you need to relax just a little bit.
I mean, is there no how do I say this? How do you view each other being Guyanese? But like you mentioned earlier, you have so many different varieties, even in the same family. Do you consider the colorism and texturism, that kind of thing, within your own family to be something of like, oh, I'm better than you are, like I was born this way? Or...
Yeah, that's like interesting. I would say, well, first of all, I think that like my family's history, and this is like me from my perspective, I'm not like a historian in this way, but um like my family got here to America pretty early, and I think a lot of the way that race is handled in Guyana changed post independence because of like the black guys in power, now the Indian guys in power, like so it became like much more murky. And for the most part, my family got here uh like before all that stuff happened, right? So I think my perspective on race might be a little bit different. I do think colorism exists, and I definitely think colorism exists. I think it exists. How do I say this? Like, I think because like in Guyana is, I think they call themselves like the land of three races. So it's like Black, Indian, and Amerindian. And then, but like demographically, there's like Black, Indian, Amerindian. There's like a group of people who are like a mixture of those things, or like some kind of.
Can you explain for us and the two people watching what Amerindian is?
So they'd be like the indigenous people who live usually like deep in the inland, because like Guyana is, most people live on the coast, and then we share like a border with Brazil, and we're kind of like in the Amazon pretty much, as far as I know. I've never actually looked at the map, but I think we're in the Amazon.
Yeah, you are.
So Amerindian people are like the indigenous people that were there, and there's like a bunch of different tribes.
There's this one really interesting thing I looked up about Guyana is True Falls.
Yes,
like
huge.
the history behind it. It's like supposed to be like the largest single drop waterfall
Yeah.
world. But then it's named after like it's the Old Man Fault or something. Have you heard about this?
I have not. But I do know it is the single drop, like the tallest single drop waterfall in the world. Yeah.
Single drop waterfall meaning it just drips.
Like it's just like there's no, I think like because I think waterfalls sometimes have like it's something underneath that kind of, but it's just like
okay.
Yeah,
So
and
it's a
like
real.
really,
it's a real. I was assuming when we looked it up, it was just like a quick every like.
no, it's like a massive. It's like pretty frightening actually.
It's a waterfall, but it's called the Old Man Falls or something because there's like a tale of this family that put like this old guy in a boat and threw him down the river because he did something ridiculous. And I was like,
good story. You love a good story, but yeah. So I forgot where we're talking, but like,
I love it.
We do have, so basically like in terms of my family, I would say that like there's a lot of like we have people in my family who are straight, like African, like meaning they're Guyanese, but they're like African descent. We've got people who are 100% Indo. We've got people who, we don't have anyone who's 100% Amerindian. I don't really know. That's like on my dad's side. I can't speak to that.
Yeah.
But and people like me who are like those three things, but like identify as Black because we're in America. But if I was in Guyana, it'd be like very clearly that I'm like a Dougla, which is a person who's a mixed race person.
How do you spell that?
Dougla.
Dougla. How let's talk about your nuclear family. Do you have siblings?
I have two half brothers.
Okay.
Yeah, two half brothers. But on my mom's side, I'm the only person who matters.
So who matters?
Do people refer to each other as Douglas? Is that like a term that people?
That is like it's like definitely a term. Like, oh, she's a Doug. Some people say Dougla. I say Dougla because I'm American, but like Dougla. Coolie is a word that we use.
Right.
Yeah,
like growing up, that was like a nickname for me and my
family. So within the community, it's a term of endearment, but outside the community, it's a slur.
Yes, I would say that like if you go on Instagram, like there are like pages with this name, like like coolie skunts, whatever. Like
We
there's
call it cooligram from our page.
yes, exactly. So like that, like so it's like I guess it is a term of endearment. I am a bit uncomfortable, like because it's something I used growing up and didn't know was offensive. And then the more that I, for me, like I self-identify as a Black person, like it's very, very clear. But at the same time, like when I'm around Guyanese people, it's like I'll get called a coolie all the time. All the
Can
time.
you expand a little bit more on this term coolie? Because I'm just interested to hear your take on this. Like,
Well,
what
because
does
from
word
how
really-
we know it, there's like in India, the baggage handlers on the trains,
Yeah.
they call them coolies.
like
We
the
know
red
it's like
shirt
a
word?
term of it's like a term of like a colonial slur. And
Mhm.
also there was that Indian movie with this actor named Govinda. It was called Coolie Number One. But can you
That
expand?
sounds like it'd be part of a screenplay. Coolie number one comes with, like, the baggage.
You want to write Coolie Number One together?
No, it's gonna be a sequel. Coolie number two.
Coolie Number Two. Well, that's dirty.
Yeah, I mean, my familiarity with it is just like I've always looked at it as like the East Indian N word, where it's like if
Right.
you can, like a Guyanese Indian person can say it. Sometimes, but it's also kind of has the same in some ways, and I don't know if it's right or wrong. I would probably lean toward it being wrong, but like similarly, how like there's like a white, maybe white-ish Puerto Rican person might use the N-word. Like there are Black people who use that word, but I think it's become less and less commonplace, and it's more if it's used out group, it's usually an insult. But then it's also like sometimes used as like a term of like a person being attractive, right? Like or like recognizing like they're like it's a mess.
Is there an element, or is there like a stigma element or an element of dehumanization to the term?
For sure. I mean, I don't think that's the intention when used by the in group, but I do think the origins of the word, similar to the N word, the C word has the same kind of. It was I'm pretty sure it was used originally by this group of colonizers to insult, and then was eventually the meaning was changed for the in group to use, and they use it however they wish.
What about the word mame-sop? Do you want to bring that back for white women? Mame-sop?
I don't think I know that word.
It's like madam. Like it's like,
Oh, I think they're having a fine time with Karen. They're about to lose their shit over a name that's not even like.
Karen's a racial slur. I can only say it because I know like two Karen. Well, no, I don't actually.
Not even that like. I mean, honestly, it's like a little cutesy, right? Like that's how white fragility is. Like you just get a name, like a regular name. It's on people's social security cards, and you're like, no.
Even their slur contorts with white fragility.
Yeah,
that's how deeply ingrained.
Call her Sharon. No, she's not gonna like that. Let's call her something else. Karen. Okay, she can accept that. She'll live.
Which brings me to: are you religious? Were you religious growing up?
No, no, not at all. I mean, yeah, no, I grew up with a multi-religious family as well.
Which religions?
So Catholic, Muslim, that's pretty much, and then like some like fringe, like Rastafarians, and then actually some fringe like people who were all white, so I guess like Pentecostals and stuff. So I've got like a bit of I've gotten a bit of everything. Like some people have married like some Hindus in my family, so like I've gotten some experience with that. I've more so identify like now in my adulthood as like not I don't like what's the word? I don't identify as agnostic, but I feel like when in times I rely often on like what I know about Islam and what I know about Catholicism. Like that's kind of where I go.
You see catharsis.
Yeah. So I feel like that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just had the religion question on here.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to dig more into that. I mean, I guess if you didn't grow up being pushed, well, okay, maybe like, okay, growing up not necessarily being beholden to a certain religion or necessarily practicing one certain religion's practices. I'm sure that made you more open-minded as a child growing up here in school. And yeah, you said you attended a lot of bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, and that's like so you think as a child, And since you didn't see an issue or any issues with colorism until you were very like an 11ish 11 12ish,
Mhm.
right? You think growing up as a child you were much more open-minded than the other children you're growing up around?
I think so, yeah. Well, it's very interesting when you speak, right? When you said like my issues with colorism, and it's also like easy for me to say when I acknowledge that like I didn't have any issues with colorism because I am not really a color that people find to be like offensive and or like, you know what I'm saying, or have any issue with. Like I think it'd be very different if I it could be, and I want to leave space for it to have been very different if I were like a darker skinned child. Or you know what I'm saying? Because it's like very easy. Like I didn't have any issue with it, but it's like, yeah, if you saw a picture of me growing up, like I was like light skinned with long hair, and it was like very easy for me to exist in the world. Like no, especially like in the 90s where it's like sometimes I'll go back to your question, but like sometimes I'll think about like a lot of women will say I didn't have any representation growing up, and I'm like I did. Like I can't bullshit because I had Tatiana Ali, who's literally Indo-Trinidadian, Afro-Trinidadian. What's her name? Hillary. Like there was like a lot of like light-skinned black women on television, or like
Right.
brown skin, you know, with long hair. So now my hair's short, but so I just wanted to say that and preface that, or like kind of like go back to that comment and
Right.
realize I'm not like, you know, blind. But right, but to what was your original question though? Sorry.
Do you feel like because you didn't have those environmental factors while you were in your very very formative years as an
Mhm.
adolescent growing up, that made you more open-minded and able to absorb differences more rather than coloring them with certain stereotypes as a kid?
I would say yes, but I will also say that going to that middle school gave me a complex that it took a really long time to get over. It was the first time that I, looking back as an adult, think that I received different treatment in the school um, than I think yeah than I would have gotten if I went to like an all black school or a black and brown school. So like even though yeah I do think I approached it open mindedly, I would say that like I did kind of leave like that space not probably thinking like the most highly of like myself or people who are like me. Like I don't think I realized it at the time, but I think I might have.
So that actually brings me to a really good thing, because I think what you just said is a very common thing with a lot of like first generation people, because I find myself later on in life, well, not later on in life, I'm still young too, but like after college, years and years after college, thinking back to different experiences with a different lens or retroactively, and being like, yo, that wasn't just a microaggression, that was an aggression. Or
Yeah,
like, yo,
like
I was actively being tokenized for this thing. So it's like, how often do you have these memories or whatever run through with your current, your current knowledge and wisdom and filter on life? These memories run through, and how often is it that you were in that situation where you didn't see it, but it's crystal clear later?
I think very often, honestly, and I think yeah, very often. I think even now, you know, I don't necessarily, I don't, I don't think I have the same view of myself and like my in the world, and so oftentimes like I'll just like think not optimistically, what's the word, like choosing to think the best of a situation over thinking that it might be racialized in some way, or you know that there's something else at play. I do think about my middle school experiences a lot because like I said I went to a performing arts school, and you would think that a performing arts school would be the space where
Yeah.
you would be allowed to like be free and be animated, but I think quite quickly I was put into the role of agitator. Like you know they thought I was like agitating, like you know like the bad kid, right? And looking back at it is like, well, maybe perhaps because I was 6 feet tall in the sixth grade, right? And so like you know, so I think that like sometimes like you look back and you're like, oh, that was them, that wasn't me, like y'all tripping, like I was just a creative, like that's what it was. But like maybe black girls are not given the space to be creative in that room, or like in that space that we're in. So I think about that often, and I try to think about that. I try not to think about it in terms of like with comedy and writing and stuff, because it's just nothing I can do about it. I really try not to.
Why do you feel like there's nothing you can do about it?
Because niggas be hating, that's why. Because like that, like is a, because here's the thing, right? I think that this is like me going off, so please forgive me.
Please
Edit it out. But I think that as a Black woman, there's a lot of emulating. There's like a lot of emulating, and everybody wants to be Black, but nobody wants to be Black. And
Almuni.
Yeah, exactly. And with that comes like a weird, like deeply suppressed subconscious resentment of your very physical being. And it's nothing that I can address. Like I cannot address this with you, that you are like that you are intimidated by like my power or my presence or whatever. So I'm not gonna spend any time thinking about it. I can't. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of white mediocrity, right? And there's a lot of like white mediocrity that's getting passed. But at the same time, like somebody had a post, a really highly regarded, respected comic said something that was like, bookers are not your friends, right? Because it's really shitty to be standing next to talent all day when you have none. And I think that a lot of times that applies to like whiteness, right? And I think that I can't control that. Not to say that there aren't talented white people. There are. I shouldn't have to say that, but there's a lot of untalented white people with access. And
right. I mean, that's that kind of you step back and you look at that on like maybe a generational level or a higher level, and that it's like maybe that explains why there's all this like appropriation or gentrification, because it's like, how do we infiltrate these spaces of color and variety and culture, and so we don't get insulted as basic?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And that's why TikTok has popped off, because it's like a direct source. It's like I don't know if the Matrix had plugs, but like they're plugged in, right? And that's why like when Donald Trump was like, I'm gonna shut down TikTok, I was like, yes, please, because they're too close to the source. Honestly, they're too close to
Can you explain that, please? What do you mean the source?
I just think that we've established, this is like me, I haven't really thought these things through, but I'm gonna say them because whatever.
Please.
But I feel like white kids are hyper aware that they don't have any culture, or culture in the way that is cool. Like they have a culture, right? But it's not like music, film, not film, but like music, dance, like a lot of the things that are accessible to kids have been dominated by Black people for a very long time now. We're talking like
created by Black people
and created by like 100 years, right? Because I mean, what is the blues? But what is jazz but the blues? What is blues but like R&B? Like so it's just kind of like,
what is Elvis but Chuck Berry?
Exactly. So I just feel like they are in some ways like kind of aware of that. But what's happening on TikTok that I find really disturbing is that it's like I could come up with a dance right now, right? Like I'm doing it. And then like 2 seconds later, a white girl with more followers does it. And because of the algorithm, like she's now able to go on Ellen and be like, this is so great. Like, and that's disgusting to me. Like, and that's really frustrating for me to have to see. And at the same time, it's like almost what's happened, but like on a macro level, it's gotten bigger. The issues have gotten bigger. It's taking them less time to get to the spring.
Right. And even in terms of like agency representation and all of that stuff, you know, those people are moving more towards these influencer characters, TikTok stars and everything, and holding them in the same regard as like movie stars in terms of clientele.
Insane.
Like that. Right. And so it's like it does feel like it's kind of like pun intended, the Wild West for appropriating culture. Right? So that's the source. Okay.
But I mean, nobody like even thinks about this, but I was thinking about it. It's so super disgusting that these TikTok stars exist. The way that they're like 16 or 17 or something, and thousands of people are watching them do shit like this. And it's just like super weird to me.
It's insane. I was reading this thing about like they are like, we're going to enter this space where they're on the cover of magazines, like they're doing things, and as millennials we're very disconnected from like what they're actually like. They're making money, they're making loads of money,
millions of dollars,
We
But
pumping out
think
metrics
about what
about
that
six
means,
figures a
though.
month,
That
easy.
just means millions of eyeballs of all different ages are looking at these 16 or 17-year-old girls in like bikinis dancing.
But the whole thing, and I just feel so uncomfortable, even when it comes to like the Instagram algorithm. I saw this girl, and she was like singing into the mic, and she was lip syncing, right? But she was like very like smoldering, whatever. I go on her page, and she's clearly in high school, and it's like I wish there was a way for me to filter out like this kind of shit, right? Because at the end of the day, and actually think about this. This probably get edited out, but I think about this with porn a lot, because
Oh, we're
porn,
keeping it in.
when you're like when you're like 18 and you're watching 18-year-olds have sex, like that's normal. But if you're like 40 or you're like 50 or 60 or 35, it becomes kind of weird. That like
Kind of.
you always, I want to be like less judgmental, kind of, but it's weird, right? And I think that's what's going to happen now, especially like somebody who's like 30 something, sir, right? Remember that from before? Okay. It's getting, you start to feel like I don't know, like I'm really starting, it's starting to hit me like how young the world is, and like how like but now I have more access to them, and it's almost like I'm only 30, but I'm getting like shoved out the door. That's what it feels like.
So
Sorry.
You don't think you're getting pushed into like a different bracket?
yeah.
Maybe, but I don't really want a yoga mat, so I don't really know why.
Okay, maybe not. Maybe not
Go
different
yoga for
bracket.
me.
Maybe not different bracket, but different sphere of influence. Because okay, for me personally, I feel like up until I was about 27, 28, I
Mhm,
was absolutely correct about every single thing I talked about.
mhm.
But then later on, when I realized that I don't really know much and that there's a lot to learn and know, I started opening up to more people, being more vulnerable with people, building more of a network of friends because of that. And I relate to people around that same age for that reason, despite whatever status level they may be or however you perceive it. So, keeping that in mind, do you feel like you are moving into it as a narrative crafter
Mhm.
by profession? Do you feel like you're moving into a different sphere or space of influence as you grow older and your words are sharper and you're more precise with your rhetoric and discourse?
I think from like I think yes, but I think so. Two things. One, I just don't think that young people like, I think we're entering a space where like really young people have are becoming commodified. Like they're becoming products, and they don't realize that they're like turning themselves into products, and that makes me uncomfortable. Right. The second part is I do agree with you that I'm moving into a different sphere of influence, because there's still money to be made off of
Right.
me, and like our our generation, that we're still we're still engaged on social media just as much as them, but probably not just as much as them. But so I think that we are, yeah, there's still money to be made off of us, short answer. So yeah, that is, but I'm just more so made uncomfortable by like how little thought is going into certain things. Like I think about sometimes, like a lot of my friends, more of my friends have kids now, and they have like Instagram pages for their kids, and like all of that data. And one hand, I think is super cool. Like if you imagine like your age now, and you can go back to see like when you were born, and you have like a chronological timeline, a chronological like visual of like your whole life, that's kind of cool. But on the other hand, it's like it's removing choice from a person. And it's like, would you choose to do that if you could? Is it? And I think that's kind of where I think we're
Wow.
entering this dangerous place where like now from birth we're online, like it's a whole life. And like how do you really flesh out your real life if you're immediately online?
Right. And Generation Z was born into this kind of social media
Hmm.
world, and so they're the most commodified. That's
Yeah.
why. Oh, that's why we're so okay with them getting killed en masse in schools.
There'll be more of them. But I think, I don't know, I just think it's like a really we're
It's
entering a
school
really,
shootings.
because now we're getting the mental health piece, and we're real, like the social dilemma thing came out, and we're realizing that, oh, like this is like a real thing. Like
Mhm.
we've been manipulated. We are products now, and
Right.
people are still putting their kids online. It's just kind of like,
Right. And apps are designed to like hit that whatever pleasure center in your brain, have you keep going back. And so
yeah.
it's like you literally have become addicted to these apps by design.
Yep, and curating your interests in a way. Like I wish that there was a way for me to be like, can you stop putting these mixed race babies on my explore page? Like I'm so sick of this shit. Because like somebody, you know, like because your friend, like their interests end up on your explore page.
Wait. Why?
Because I think that's fetishization. I think it's weird.
I don't think we go back to tokenization or fetishization. So how is that fetishization? Please tell us.
I just think it's really it's because a lot of times, right? Like I said, like a lot of like I have this really bad joke that I've never told on stage where I'm like Black and Indian is just a Dominican person. Like it's just like Black and Dominican just Black and Indian just makes like Dominican, and that's boring. I say this to say that it's like nobody cares. Like no one's like, that's like exotic. No. Could you just make a browner person? Like that's all that is. Like you don't really get anything interesting out of that. But I think that the whole mixed race thing is going back to like the features of a person of color, but like not the complexion. It's always like a person with like a baby that's like maybe like I'm trying to think of someone like Steve Curry's complexion with like I don't know
Blake Griffin's
hair and Anderson Cooper's eyes.
Oh, wow.
And like think of whatever Black person with full lips. So it's just to me it's just like a very uncomfortable thing, and it actually reminds me of this concept of I'm gonna mispronounce it like I've done everything, but blanqueamento, which is like the lightening of a race. And so there's this really famous portrait of a Brazilian family, and it's like the beginning of the family is the grandmother, and the grandmother is like very dark, and then there's her daughter is like probably like my complexion, and then there's a daughter with her child, and the child is like a white kid. And I think that like a lot of the stuff that we see on Instagram, like the mixed race stuff, is not so much like a celebration of, but like a weird like a weird like science project that like has like Black usually as the base, but like let's add some more things into there. Let's get some more stuff.
You think it's like an unintentional generational ethnic cleansing?
I don't think it's unintentional at all. No, I definitely think we are. I think that there's this weird, and this is gonna get me canceled. I already know, but I find it sometimes also deeply frustrating. Like in commercials, there's like I talk to my mom about it all the time. She's like, I'm so tired. So my mom is not obviously is a mixed race person. She's not like you can be mixed race and racist, but she's like complaining that there's a lot of like interracial couples on television, but there's not any like Black couples. There's not any like Indian couple. Like there's just like, and there's always one of the couples is always a white person. Like it's very rarely like, yeah, no, it's really frustrating because it feels very intentional. It feels like, and then once again, we can look at countries that have done this. Like being Black in Brazil is not a positive experience. Being dark in any part of the world is almost inherently has some kind of form of subjugation attached to it. So it feels very intentional, and it feels like it doesn't feel like, oh, we've gotten to this place of equality where everyone's like, I'm fucking everybody. It's like, no, that's not where we're at. You know, it doesn't feel that way. It feels very
so
feels gross.
Calling back to the beginning of the interview, so do you think that is a potential consequence of there being that limited space of representation and the tokenized voices saying, oh yeah, we're out here fucking everybody, drowning out the voices of, hey, you know, we're being ethnically cleansed with this recklessness?
I think the and this is like, I've already given you a lot of weird answers, but I feel as if, I'm sorry if this whole...
We're going to work together on editing this. I promise. I promise.
I'm sorry, this whole podcast was like Electra.
We will edit the shit out of this episode. It'll be a 20-minute episode.
No, but I feel as if like what's not coming up in the conversations about like mixed race this, mixed race that, is that like colorism has very real, tangible advantages, right? Like it's like, okay, yeah, there's like it's that, and there's also like no one wants to acknowledge the second part of like cultural capital. Like there's like real cultural capital attached to these things. Yeah. If my eyes were green, I'd probably have an easier life. Like that's just, and it's like bizarre, right? Like that's like a super strange thing to be like, my eyes were blue, my life would be better. But it would
have that now with DNA splicing and all that stuff. You could even have like, I think it all, you mentioned it earlier. It's the Matrix. And it's so crazy that you mentioned the Matrix, and I'm glad we're editing this out. But I was reading an article.
We're not editing this out.
What? Well, I was reading an article last night for some reason about the Matrix, and then like it led me to, because I'm doing this SEO stuff and I'm trying to understand how Google ranks pages. So I'll go through every single, like I'll go through different links. I'll try to figure out like how it's really working, you know, like how Google works. And I came across this article about how the Matrix is basically about trans people and them
Yes, it is.
being in the
Yeah.
closet. And I was like, what? I did not even
So
like know
the
that.
creators, the Wachowski,
Sister.
Wachowski sisters.
Wachowski
They used to be
sisters.
brothers, but now they're sisters. And
Thank you, Electra.
Sisters.
That doesn't say that on my DVD. No, that's incredible.
It's this whole idea that you can go online and be anything you want.
Right. No, I mean, it's just like in any fictional thing, and we talk about this a lot, and, you know, it's crafting fictional narratives. You know, the best ones are the ones that take this heavy concept and code it in to some sort of extended metaphor. And so the Matrix is that extended metaphor for this transformation, or, you know, like how you perceive and all that stuff.
Yeah. I'm like really super into science fiction right now. Like I'm starting to have a greater appreciation for like what it actually.
What are you into?
I've been watching Lovecraft Country, which I consider to be science fiction.
I heard that's like Afrofuturism. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of like Octavia, like I think there's like some like light Octavia Butler stuff in there. I've been watching. I mean, some movies I just love, like Interstellar, Arrival. I think it's really solid. I've just been like really trying to get into it more because I think I just understand it better, and also just because I'm kind of I'm interested in I'm currently writing something that's supposed to be science fiction, and I realize like there's not enough science in it, and I gotta figure.
Tell us anything about that?
Yeah, sure. If I'll tell it, just edit it out. Just, you know, if I'll tell you.
Don't tell us. I'm gonna edit it.
No,
out.
well, okay, fine, whatever. It's just about a girl who, I mean, it's not like proprietary.
Give us a general. Just general themes.
Waking up from being cryogenically frozen, and just like the ethics that come into like what when you wake up in a world from being cryogenically frozen and you had no family, what would you do?
Yo, I saw your post on that asking. I thought you were talking about that like Netflix thing that's coming out where they froze their daughter.
So I watched it, and that's where I got the idea, because it's, to me, it's like a super fascinating thing. It says so much about like what your thoughts are in the afterlife, but also just like, is it fair to, so basically like my protagonist is like a person who wakes up, their family's dead, they don't really have that much money, it's just why they've been woken up, and they've been like in a VR thing, and now they have to like deal with the real world, and like have to exist with like the social mores.
That's so fucking cool.
So that's what I'm working on.
Like that,
nobody's gonna take that idea. Like nobody wants that.
Right. Well, I mean, it's how you execute it. It's your tone. It's your the way you grew up, and everything that's going to make it unique. And the fact that you're a comedian, you know how to craft narratives, you know about all this metric stuff, and whatever. And this is a great time to wrap up this conversation, anyways, because we've been going on way too long.
Sorry.
No, I love it. This is one of the best conversations I feel like we've had, especially, you know, for this podcast. I think like you got into like a lot of things that I think the younger people might not necessarily see, because, you know, we're bombarded with coded rhetoric all the time. And so decoding it, and, you know, I think we talked about, you know, when you're getting older and you're getting in that different sphere or space of influence, I think with the thing that we serve, getting into that sphere of influence, is working as the decoders of a lot of this rhetoric until or unless we're co-opted by the machines that do code the rhetoric. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, I'm sure that you are, just as I am, just as Fani is, where code switching is effortless to us. No?
Your thing froze.
Did you just say code switching?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I said just like Fani and I are, I'm sure you are as well. Code switching is almost like effortless to us with the biculturalism and, you know, growing up in that kind of thing, but having to be in different environments.
Sorry.
Yeah. Did I freeze again? Oh.
Sorry. No, sorry. That's so funny. Wait, let's do a screenshot real quick. We'll do it later.
That's what that was? I was like, what happened right now?
I was doing Tom Green face. But yeah, no, anyways, I think with that, maybe the angle of all of these conversations is to help decode a lot of this like evilness for younger people, because the younger people, Generation Z, is so commodified from the get-go without really being able to see. It's like being a fish in water, or being like that the frog that boil in a steady boiling pot. So I mean, yeah, I think that was great. Like this was great. You gave us a lot of insight, and thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate having you here, and I know people that are watching really appreciate this. And
Wait, my screenshot came out bad. We got to do it again. Smile. Thank you. All right, you guys have been great.